Section 1 of the Daredevil of the Army. Experiences as a Buzzer and Despatch Rider by Austin Patrick Corcoran. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 1. The author starts for Berlin on a motorcycle and finds himself presently on the Marne. Part 1. We are awaiting our turn to get aboard the Biscay, which is lying at her berth in Southampton. It is 7 in the evening, and we have been riding all day, covering the 100-odd miles between Chatham and the sea. Our trip has left us dusty and damp with sweat, and our reception is not tending to relieve our discomfort. Lined up beside us, some 2,000 Tommies are scanning us with the frank criticism of their kind. Our bikes obviously provoke their amusement, and we ourselves their half-tolerant contempt. Occasionally a fragment of their conversation floats towards us, indicative of their general attitude of mind. "Who the hell are them blokes anyway, Nobby?" one regular remarks to another. "Gwine to fight on bikes, be they?" "Garn," replies Nobby with his air of superior wisdom. "They ain't goin' to war? They's goin' to a rice. Rice, me eye! Look at their uniforms!" And then evidently for the first time he looks at them closely himself, and surprise replaces the disgust in his tone. "Gawd Almighty, if they ain't two up! Gwine to ride over the Kaiser, sonny?" He puts the question impertinently to the man nearest him. For answer he receives a silent scowl, and almost voluntarily we all stiffen to attention, only to be reminded somewhat sharply of our own rawness. After all, we are but amateurs at his professional game. Only a week ago — it is still but August the 17th — we were civilians, with no thought of entering the service. Now, though we wear the King's own coat and 2 corporal stripes adorn our sleeves, we can scarcely claim the title of soldiers. Rigid and severe, we are striving to hide our discouragement under an air of indifference, when suddenly the voice of the Sergeant Major comes booming across the dock. "Now, will you, gentlemen," a pause on the appellation emphasises its intended sarcasm, "kindly try to get those bikes of yours aboard?" Instantly a shout goes up from the assembled regiment. The Sergeant Major has excellent lungs, and amid general jeering we approach the gangplank. "Rotten blighters," I hear a mutter in front of me. So we, the first civilians to take part in the Great War, leave England for France and the front. At 7:30, after much shouting and shrill screeching of whistles, we finally get under way. My motorcycle stowed safely in the after well deck, I seek a quiet corner outside the Marconi cabin on the hurricane deck, and squatting on a coil of rope, settle myself to think. It is my first time in 10 days to indulge in such exercise. All round me is a buzz of conversation. I can hear the clank of an occasional mess tin, as some well-seasoned regular proceeds to make himself at home. Looking about, I see some dozen of his kind, coats open at the collar, belt unloosened, sprawling on benches or on the floor. And the sight of them makes me horribly homesick. "You're a hot-headed idiot," I decide to myself, "always rushing to the rescue before you know the house is afire. and I heartily wished myself back in the cool grove of Corrientes. For it was at Barcelona that the first mutterings of the storm found me. Austria and Serbia on the brink of war. The Balkans did not interest me. Russia coming to the rescue. I got a letter from home. There was chance of our being caught in the whirlwind. Hot on the heels of this came the news that Germany was mobilising and France preparing for her own defence. I crossed to England just in time to hear the first cry for volunteers. Then it seemed to come as the answer to a prayer. If there was any form of adventure which life had still to offer me, I did not know it at the time. I had hunted in the heart of Africa, had ranched in Bolivia, had sailed twice round the earth and seen all its civilisations. But still I was only 26, and not yet surfeited with errantry. What next? War, the greatest of all adventures. I had not thought to find it in my time. It was in such spirit that I joined the army. No band played me into a recruiting office. No call of patriotism stirred my heart or conscience. I know I am only confessing my own sins, but on my head be they. Just one consideration gave me pause for a moment. Again I reveal my lack of grace. I know something of discipline in the Navy. I surmised it might be similar in the Army, and I had no desire to experience its tedium. To get to France without the dull preliminary drilling of a camp, that was my only object. And when the special call came for university men to form a corps of motorcycle dispatch riders, I fought my way to the recruiting office like the rest. It was quick work. I passed the doctor, proved myself competent to handle a bike, went to Chatham to get my equipment, and now here I am, rigged out in His Majesty's regimentals, jeered at by his soldiers, looked askance at by his officers. A bloomin' civilian buttin' in on a soldier's business. Lonely, old chap? I feel a hand on my shoulder and look up into a pair of grey Scotch eyes. My name's Grant. He holds out his hand. I take it, and so meet my best friend. A Dundee lawyer about my own age, he has joined for more serious considerations. Something of a student, he saw a crisis was coming. Something of a sportsman, he wanted to be in the thick of it. So he handed his business over to a locum tenens, a man too old to serve, and hurried up to London to join. For a while we talk on general topics, then on that nearest our hearts. Can we, undisciplined, hastily picked men, really stand the shock of a battle? Is a soldier's business just a matter of nerve, or does it require training? The powers that be have frankly acknowledged they are trying an experiment in thus choosing us. The military men have scoffed at their confidence. Are we to set a precedent in favour of individual initiative, or are we merely to be horrible examples? It is 10 o'clock before we realise that it is time we have food. But where to get it? Our equipment does not include it. Just a tick, says Grant, and leaves me for a moment to return with a package of sandwiches that he had carefully stowed away into the tool bag of his machine. Those finished, We nose round in search for more secluded corners. We want to sleep, and we have not yet learned to do it gregariously. Finally we decided in favour of one of the boats that has been turned in. Down we throw ourselves on the cover, thanking heaven we have learned to rough it. That ride has insured us against the risks of insomnia. Dawn wakes us to a raucous sound of snoring and a distant vision of the French coast, on which Havre stands out, a black dot on the dim grey line. It is Grant who rouses me to full consciousness. "Come on, let's look for a wash." I follow him sleepily. We trudge the ship over thoroughly, upper deck, lower deck, middle deck, all the other decks, but no sign of water can we see, nor do we meet others bent on a like quest. We have decided that bathing is a luxury not allowed to soldiers, and are proceeding to return to our nook, when a sudden turn brings us up sharply against a spruce, shining major, whom we learn to be the second in command of the battalion on board. We have saluted in our self-conscious rookie fashion, and are passing, when he halts us with a raised hand. We stop, and are thus ensnared into our first lesson in the nice etiquette of the army. "Corporal?" "Yes, sir." Grant is the spokesman. "What are all you people with bikes doing aboard?" Grant informs him we are the motorcycle Despatch Corps. "Despatch riders? Why, I had no idea there were so many in the British Army. How long have you two been in?" "5 days, sir." The Major whistles, then looks us quizzically over. "5 days, and you're going straight into the fun? Rather risky, eh?" We shrug our shoulders, and he turns to go, when Grant brings him up abruptly with a query. Did he know where we could manage to get a wash? The enormity of the crime, in a corporal's thus addressing a major on matters of personal cleanliness, hardly comes home to us even after his lecture. We are rather hot under the collar when he finishes his harangue, though he delivers it with all possible consideration. But his next move more than makes up for the humiliation, for he takes us to his own room for a regular wash. He was a thoroughly decent sort, that Major. By the time we have finished, everyone is awake, and the ship is tying up alongside the wharf. All around is a din calculated to deafen tender ears. The clang of accoutrements being adjusted, mess tins, rifles, bayonets, and then the mad cheering of the people on the dock. Half the civilian population of France, or so it seems to me, must have had word that les Anglais were arriving. They have gathered there with flags, food, tobacco. Though it pleases us, still their excitement makes us sheepish. What a fearfully demonstrative people they are! We haven't yet realised the imminence of their peril, and their sense of safety in being backed by the British fleet. It is an hour before the Biscay has disgorged her men and cargo. A young officer meets us on the dock, and lines us up away on the right, telling us to await further orders. Meantime our critics, the Tommies, have drawn up in company formation. Soon they are ready for their road. Where it leads, heaven only knows. Just as they receive the order, "Quick march!" there comes an Irish voice, bellowing from the bridge of the boat we are leaving behind. "So long, Mike!" A man in the ranks looks back and waves. So long, Tim. It's a long way to Tipperary," he shouts. Instantly a laugh goes up from the troop, and a rollicking voice starts the song. It's a long way to Tipperary. Soon the whole company has taken it up, and so for the first time of many hundred in France, I see our men swing off to battle to the air of the popular tune. A strange sense of desolation sweeps over me as I watch them go. Somehow their jaunty air of recklessness brings home to me for the first time the grim reality of the enterprise I am embarked on. I glance at the men beside me, lined up so quietly with their bikes. Perhaps I am only seeing through the haze of my own feelings, but they, too, strike me as strangely silent and subdued. But we get no time to indulge our desolation, for no sooner has the dock cleared of the Tommies than our officer presents himself again. "You will ride to Rouen and report there to the transportation officer, who will direct you to your different sections." His voice is very formal at first, then changes abruptly to a more cheery note. "Off with you," he orders. Then, as I am proceeding to mount (I happen to be at the head of the line), he hands me an envelope to be delivered to the transportation officer. I learned later that it contained a note identifying us. We are halfway across the dock when a happy thought strikes him. "Cafe to your right as you go out," he hollers. We hear him. We would have heard if we had been miles off. We make for it with all the haste of the really hungry, and, as I eat my omelette and drink my cafe au lait, I have my first opportunity to size up, en masse, the men who are henceforth to be my companions. An English poet, commemorating the early deeds of the Despatch rider, named him perhaps appropriately the Daredevil. A less enthusiastic gentleman, describing him since, has called him a glorified messenger boy. As a matter of fact, he may be either one, or both, according to the character of the fighting. In trench warfare he is more liable to be the latter, but there were no trenches when we went to France. The duty of a despatch rider, as everyone knows, is to carry confidential messages of urgent importance from one staff officer to another. They may be from a general to a general. They may be merely from a colonel to a captain. Always they are from one commissioned man to another, which is the reason why he wears a corporal's stripes. According to the regulations of the British Army, no man in the ranks may approach such an officer of his own accord, unless accompanied by a non-com. And non-coms, or non-commissioned officers, are naturally of too much importance to be spared as permanent escorts. Were it not for this detail of army etiquette, the despatch rider would be no more than a mere private. As to the method of performing his duty, there is no definite rule. When we received our instructions in London, they were practically summed up in the following sentence: "Deliver your despatch as quickly as you can, and then return to your own section." The how and the when, we were informed, would be matters for our own discretion, and much discretion we needed at times. Suppose a despatch rider meets with an accident on the road, and his bike is put entirely out of commission. Unseen and unsuspected shell craters, Explosions that fling both man and machine off the road are everyday occurrences in this job. Even if the man escapes unhurt, he can't foot the distance always, if the matter is urgent and there are miles to go. A special provision allows him the privilege of commandeering on such occasions any vehicle that may come his way, whether it be horse or car, and whoever be the occupant. But there was a man once who, after tramping a couple of miles, could find no conveyance except that occupied by a general. He had courage, however, so he turned the general out, but oh, what a tirade he brought on his own head. Afterwards he received a decoration for his audacity, when the general, who fortunately had a sense of humour, had had time to recover his dignity and his temper. But I should hate to have been in his shoes. There were scores of us, of course, who ordered officers out of their saddles and diverted Army Service Corps trucks out of their destined route, and the curses that accompanied us on our journeys were not always pleasant to hear. If our instructor had substituted the word diplomacy for discretion, he would have been somewhat nearer the mark. Again, there is always the danger when the armies are on the move and not engaged, as they were later, on stationary destruction, of coming full tilt into a straggling enemy troop. "If you fall into the hands of the enemy," said our mentor, "destroy your despatch at all costs, otherwise they may divert it to their own staff officers." And then what a coup for the hostile strategists! The usual method in such a case was to eat it, or rather to swallow it whole. The authorities, careful as usual of our digestions, as a rule wrote it on slim tissue paper that would almost melt in the mouth. Occasionally we had sufficient time to burn it, but not often. Occasionally, too, after destroying it as a precaution, we escaped. To meet this emergency, which was also foreseen, we had orders to memorise our message always before starting, so that, in case of necessity, we could deliver it by word of mouth. This rule in its turn led to further complications. The enemy knew that we had our dispatches learned by heart. If they caught us and failed to find papers on our persons, immediately such a cross-questioning began as might well confuse even a seasoned criminal. Usually this was met by a closed mouth which no threat of death would serve to open. This, in turn, was met with a new ruse. Before very thorough detective work had eliminated the menace, it was no unusual thing to meet men wearing our uniform and speaking our language, but serving on the staff of His Imperial Majesty of Germany, and not on that of King George. They would have been very glad to induce us to part amicably with our information. It was to circumvent such gentlemen that our last order was issued. "The despatch must be delivered in person, to the officer to whom it is addressed." That was all. A unique simplicity marked our entire training. I decided, when they dismissed me in London, that it would take a fool to fail, and comparing my job with that of a private on the line, I felt that the War Office has no high respect for my intelligence. Consequently, as I looked round me that morning in the Havre Café at the men selected for the Cycle Corps, I was astonished at the lavish hand that would waste such material on such crude and casual work. Out of the 20 assembled round me, not more than 2 had failed to graduate from either Oxford or Cambridge, and they were professional men of high standing in their own line, far above the type that might be deemed suitable for a competent regular. Yet it was not so much trained intelligence that marked them as a group, as a native ability, a certain keenness, a quality of initiative, that would augur well for their readiness to meet an emergency. Physically, too, they were far above the average. About 3 of them fell short of a full 6 feet. A few would top that height by a few inches. All of them had proved their power to handle a gun with ease, and shown an intimate knowledge of the moods and mechanism of motor cycles, which facts in themselves constituted a guarantee that they had lived rather largely in the open. If further evidence was needed, it was supplied by their appetites. "Voulez-vous donner moi une autre omelette?" someone asked Madame in his best nigger French. He had already consumed 2 of those substantial concoctions. "Mais, monsieur!" Madame, a plump, pleasing person, throws up her hands in horror, then remembering the instincts of her trade, runs off and is back with it in a few moments. We are kept waiting by him. I learn later that his name is Poole, but not even our outspoken impatience could induce him to hurry. By the time he is finished, however, we have mapped out our routes, and by 9 o'clock we are well on our way to Rouen. It is a glorious morning. As we skim along the Rue de Nationale at full throttle, our spirits rise to the point of exuberance. Poole comes in for most of our surplus mental energy. Though he weighs about 250 pounds, he is riding a 2 1/4 horsepower Douglas. Lawrence, a rather decent chap, offers to change, suggesting that the giant will never make the journey safe on his small machine. Indignant, Poole offers to race him to Rouen for 10 shillings. Probably it was our desire to keep even with the contestants that brought us into that town in record time. We arrived there about noon. It is another hour before we can find the transportation officer. Finally we locate him at a rest camp. It seems we are to be split up into sections along the various parts of the line. Poole, Lawrence, Grant and I are to be attached to the 2nd Cavalry Brigade. What luck! We have chummed up already. The next lap of our journey is to end at Amiens, where we will be directed straight to the fighting line. With luck we will be in the thick of it in another day. It is August 25th, 1914. The contemptible British Expeditionary Force in France, under Field Marshal Sir John French, is falling back before the numerically overwhelming German army. From the Bavay Maubeuge positions, the 2nd Corps under Sir Horace Smith-Dorrien is retreating with orderly haste on the Le Cateau Lanrices line, their rear protected by a troop of cavalry. And in a little farmhouse outside the former town we are endeavouring to keep open communications in a temporary signal office, which leaves much to be desired. It is a dark, dirty hovel. One wonders at the family's reluctance to leave it, but our haste gives us no leisure to make a choice. In a remote corner of the kitchen the telephone operator has set up his switch on a wooden pedestal labelled Jam. All along the wall, where still hang the cooking utensils, are ranged the telegraphers, busily clicking their Morse keys. If visible evidence is needed of the urgency of their tasks, it may be gathered from the positions of their woodbines. Instead of depending at the usual angle from their lower lips, they now stick jauntily behind their ears. Removed from the rest, at a position near the window, the subaltern, a mere boy on whom responsibility has thrust age, sits anxiously poring over his maps and charts, which tell of the positions of the lines and cables that an enemy shell may at any moment cut. Exhausted men, on whose faces is a 4 days' growth of beard, already matted with summer sweat and summer dust, heavy-eyed with sleeplessness, hollow-eyed with strain, they work with the dogged intensity of desperation. "Line down on the road to Cambrai!" The man has to scream to drown the gun roar. With a curse, a lineman sets out on his job. "Last 2 despatch riders not yet returned, sir." This message is meant as a reminder. The subaltern looks up, pauses a moment, as if to consider. Those despatch riders had left around 5 o'clock. It is now 5:30, and Landrecies is but 5 miles away. They should be back, unless some disaster has overtaken them. With sudden decision, the subaltern puts his head through the neighbouring window, and shouts in the general direction of the barn. "Next 2 despatch riders." At the sound of his voice, 4 men spring to their feet. They had been lying full length in the dirty yard, a somewhat cooler spot on this hot August evening than their quarters, the cow house. They are the remaining 4 of the 6 despatch riders who go to form this motorcycle section. Let us present them before they are separated by the impending journey. A couple of weeks ago a casual glance might have sized them up as gentlemen. Now even a close scrutiny might have measured them as tramps. True, they are clad in the uniform of the British Army, but it is so covered with dirt as to have lost even its nondescript hue. The coat, which a regimental tailor buttons smartly to the throat, is thrown open to admit the sultry air, and a cap, which a kind quartermaster places so trimly on the head, has been replaced by a large handkerchief, the colour of which is somewhat shady. Only the belts at the waist, from which depend businesslike revolvers, and the maps slung securely over the shoulders, betray their fitness for the part they are to play, of which their bikes, much cleaner looking objects than their owners, give further convincing evidence. Who are they? Well, there is Grant of the grey Scotch eyes, he from whose mouth hangs the dun pipe. And there is Hudson, the Belfast architect, now rivalling the grimiest of his bricklayers. And there is Harrison, the Cantab undergraduate, whose "people were so decent about his age." A scrupulous father might have held him back a couple of years. Lastly, there is myself, a different person from that particular young man whom a short time ago we found looking so eagerly for a wash. 2 weeks on the line have taught us the unimportance of such trifles as cleanliness. What's a dirty neck, more or less, with death staring you in the face? Life itself is the possession that we have now learned to prize, and war, the great romantic adventure, has developed into a wild scurry to dodge the bursting of a shell. Hudson and Harrison are next on the list, but Grant and I accompany them to the farmhouse door, in case the subaltern might care to choose us for this crisis. Harrison has only arrived the day before, but it's his turn, and it seems he has to take it. You know what to do? That's right. Swallow it if they get you. Remember, there are stray Ullans about, and Poole and Lawrence may have been caught. Now for the directions. Go together to the crossroads, those with the crucifix, then take separate routes to the town. One of you may get through, if the two don't. A pleasant prospect. The subaltern looks at Harrison as he presents it, as if expecting some protest from the new recruit. But none comes, and the youngster, their age and station but for an accident, is suddenly moved to put out a hand. Good luck. He gives each a grip in turn, before they double out of the room. Better strap the thing on your forefinger, old chap, advises Hudson, with the wisdom gleaned in a week. He is referring to the precious tissue paper. Handier to your mouth that way. It takes them but 2 minutes to memorise the message, and then they mount and are off on the darkening, dangerous road. Soon the crest of a hill hides them, and, left alone, we lie down again. Among our new accomplishments is a facility for sleeping anywhere. But before slumber could come to soothe us, we hear voices near by, and we listen. Some straggling Tommies are talking, and we are the subject under discussion. Not so bad for bloomin' civvies, says one, apropos of our departed friends. We feel that we have accomplished much in these 2 weeks. End of section 1.